Well, good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, September the 8th, 2021, and it's the second Wednesday of the month. So that means it's our Town Manager Citizens Academy. Each month, we try to talk to you about a variety of different topics and things that are going on in the town of Canandaigua. This month, what I want to do is spend a little bit of time talking to you about the town budget. So the 2022 tentative town budget we have that is now been released to the public and to the town board. So I want to spend a little bit of time diving into the particular sections of the budget this month during the Citizens Academy and teach a little bit about the process, how it comes about, what happens, how it gets to the point where it is now and where it goes from here, and really what's included in the town of Canandaigua town budget. So we'll kind of walk through those process. Maybe it won't take up the whole hour this month as we kind of walk through that process, but we'll get into some of the particulars of the budget. So first, I have a printed copy here in my hand that I go through, and all the town board members get a printed copy of this, but where would you find the budget or the budget information? So let's go to the Town of Canandaigua website. And so I'm just going to pull that up here, townofcanandaigua.org. And right here on the front page, there's a ton of useful information here. You always have the search box right up here where you can get additional information or type in a keyword and then go find that information. But what I'm going to do is I know specifically where I want to go to find the budget information. So I'm going to click on this tab called Government right here at the top. And then I'm going to go to officials. And the first place I'm going to go right here is the town manager. And that is me. And this is the Town Manager Citizens Academy. And from right here, you can see there's links to a whole variety of different information, different places to go. But specifically what we're talking about today is the budget. So I'm going to click on the budget tab here. And then this is going to pull me up a page for us to take a look at here, the Town of Canandaigua budget, and it gives all kinds of additional information here about previous budgets, the previous year's budgets that were adopted going back to, what does this go back to, 2010. It also sees the current operating budget. You see the adopted, the preliminary, and the tentative budget, as well as the 22 budget preparation, the 2022 budget. So let's just pause right there for a second and talk about that for a second. I keep just glancing over the other screen because I'm also monitoring, this is a Facebook Live experience here today too. And so just to see if there's comments coming in that manner. So just taking a look at this page here for a second. So this is a great place for information where you can look at any number of different things relative to the budgets, kind of like I said, the 2020 through the 2010, but you see specifically under the current operating budget, the tentative, the preliminary, and the adopted budgets for 2021. So I want to talk about that for a quick second here. So you have the tentative 21 budget. You see just above that on the screen, there's a preliminary budget and an adopted budget. So there's a budget process that's actually established by New York state law. And it goes like this. The budget officer for the municipality is charged with putting together a balanced tentative budget, then presenting that tentative budget to the municipal board. In this case, it would be our town board. And then the town board has the ability, once they receive that budget, they can make as an entity, as in our particular case, the town of Canandaigua has 5 town board members. They can make any changes at all they wish to that budget. They could throw it out and start over. They could tweak it. They could do no changes to it. They can do anything at all that they want to any changes of that tentative budget. But what is presented to them is a tentative budget. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit more today. Once they have received the budget, they're at that point able to make any changes they want, and they can declare it a preliminary budget. Once they declare it the preliminary budget, they set a public hearing and then hold public hearings on the preliminary budget, hearing or hearings, whatever is needed, and then they move it forward. They can at any time up to the point where they adopt it, make any changes. So they could make changes to the preliminary budget as well. And then they would go ahead and ultimately adopt the next year's fiscal operating budget. It is required, New York state law does require that the governing body enact a budget by approximately November the 20th. I believe that is actually a firm date. Yes, just double checking on something there. November 20th of the year prior to the fiscal year when it begins. Our fiscal year is the same as a calendar year. So for 2022, that would be January 1st, 2022 through December 31st, 2022. So they can adopt that during their regular meetings that they would hold. Theoretically, October is normally when that is done for the town of Canandaigua. The town board meets the third Monday of each month. So normally what they would do is adopt that budget for the 2022 budget during that third meeting of the month in October, after they hold a public hearing and make any changes that they need to make to the preliminary budget after they've declared that a preliminary budget and move forward from there. I just want to pause here for one more quick second. The other thing that's on this page is additional information about understanding the tax cap, what it means, what it doesn't mean, and gives you a lot more information about really understanding that. And there's a great article, a great letter that was done. This goes back a few years ago now by Robin Johnson, the former director of Ontario County Real Property Services, but it's still very, very pertinent today. Relative to the tax cap and understanding what that means. The tax cap is something that's been established by the state of New York, the New York State Legislature. And basically what it does is it relates not to the taxes you pay, it relates to the tax levy that the municipality warrants against the property taxpayers or the properties of the town of Canandaigua. So the levy goes against the property. You as a landowner, as a resident of the town of Canandaigua, or as a landowner in the town of Canandaigua, you own that property. So obviously, ultimately, that tax is passed on to you as the landowner. But it's a tax levy warrant for the properties in the municipality. And so what that is the tax cap says it's 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is lower. So in our particular case, there's actually a formula and a calculation that we have to run to determine whether or not a budget is tax cap compliant or not. So we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to close this understanding the tax cap. We'll talk about that again in a second. I'm just going to open a new tab here for the tentative budget, and it's just going to take a second to load. This budget is about 167 pages long. And one of the reasons for the length of the budget is because of the narrative at the beginning of the budget. And we try very much to make this so that it's very clear and concise and easy to understand. So you see the book that I have that I'm holding up here, this is the book that I have in my hand, the 22 tentative, you see the word tentative right there, the 22 tentative Town of Canandaigua town budget. And it matches the same that's on the screen here. And you see the cover sheet here. The cover sheet is quite a few photos relative to the construction of Motion Junction. That's the new playground, fully inclusive playground being constructed on Outhouse Road in the town of Canandaigua at Richard P. Outhouse Memorial Park. And this really kind of highlights our highway department, who has been working tirelessly over the last 6 months, I guess, or so, working on the site work in preparation for the playground. The playground is now, the equipment is up. There's more work to do relative to that, and the pouring of the surfacing. There's a lot of work that has to be done with sidewalks and block walls, and then on to a building eventually. But this year, the 22 tentative budget really encompasses the support of the tremendous community support that we've had with the construction of Motion Junction. Over 700 volunteers the week of August 23rd pitched in to help build the equipment, put the equipment together, and then erect that equipment on that site. And much more work to be done. Stay tuned for that, and we'll talk about that in a future episode. But on to the tentative budget. So The Town of Canandaigua town budget, this is the highway dedication, or I'm sorry, the Motion Junction dedication of the front cover. And really, I just want to talk about this for a quick second. The Town of Canandaigua Highway Department, our crews are really amazing. The things that they do, that they can construct. We lovingly refer to them as the Canandaigua construction crew, but it really, everything that they've done this year and they continue to do for us every year, but with all of the projects all over the town, but make our town and our community just a wonderful place to live, work, and in this particular case, play with Motion Junction. The next sheet here in the budget just references our management team, as well as the town board, our town supervisor, Kathy Minicotts, deputy town supervisor, Jared Simpson, town board members, Terry Finelli, Linda Dorzak, Gary Davis, and Jared Simpson. And then our management team, myself, I am the town manager and budget officer. Our clerk, who helps me very closely with financial matters, Kay Silverstrom Jensen. And then my immediate office, Lindsay Ferrari, our human resource and parks coordinator, Sarah Reynolds, administrative coordinator, as well as our elected town clerk, highway superintendent, our town assessor, our town planner, and of course, our elected town justice all make up the overall management team here. The next page kind of gets into the table of contents. You don't want to sit and read all 166, 67 pages. This kind of tells you the table from a table of contents perspective, specifically the things that you might want to look at. I would actually recommend, if nothing else, take a look at the message to the residents and the taxpayers on page 5, and take a look at the budget at a glance on page 9. That really kind of gives you some of the details associated with the overall 22 proposed spending plan. Now, the Town of Canandaigua budget, we refer to it as one document, and it is. We're looking at a 167-page document this morning, this book. It's a document, but it's actually made up of 28 special districts, a highway fund, and a general fund. So the Town of Canandaigua town budget is actually 30 smaller budgets. All 30 of those budgets, no matter how large or small, have to be balanced. The revenues have to match the expenditures. We have to account for whatever contractual or capital expenditures are going on, personnel expenditures, benefit expenditures, and there's classifications for each of those that is required by the New York State Comptroller's Office, as well as the revenue that's coming in, and that all has to fully balance out. So we'll get into some of the details. What we'll do is we'll start with an overview, kind of looking at things kind of as an overall, and then a little bit later in the segment, we'll get into some of the details about some of those special districts, those 28 special districts, plus the highway fund and the general fund. So the first page here, or the page 5 of the document here, we're just kind of looking at the message to the residents and the taxpayers here. This 22 budget, tentative budget, really holds the tax rate flat at $1.03 per $1,000 of assessed value. And I know, and we're going to talk more about the tax rate in a little bit, but I know people a lot of times will say to me, I pay a lot in taxes. And that's really what this section of the budget really is geared towards, and talking about that. Yes, we all do pay a lot of taxes, but there's only a very small piece of that actually goes to the Town of Canandaigua. We'll talk about that more in just a moment. Additionally, we look at a whole variety of factors as we're working on preparing the tentative budget to present that to the town board. One of the things that I closely am working with is not only our department heads and our finance people in internal, the assessor also, because we're monitoring what is happening with the market relative to the assessed values of the homes, because we have what is called ad valorem taxes. And those taxes is the tax rate that we talk about often, the $1.03 per thousand that gets thrown out, or a tax rate per thousand. That is based on the assessed value of a home. So if the assessed value goes up and the tax rate stays the same, you're going to pay a little bit more in taxes, right? Even if the tax rate stays flat, if the assessed value goes up, you're going to end up paying more. So that's something that we very closely watch as we go through this, even if the tax rate is staying the same. And I'll show you in detail that in a minute. So this next paragraph, the average home in the town of Canandaigua for 2021 is assessed at $309,349. Now, that's not to say every home in the town of Canandaigua is assessed for $309,000, obviously. Some are more, some are less. But that is the average of where we're at in the town of Canandaigua right now. And we're continuously watching that. And that is up from 2020, and it's up from 2019 and 2018. You see, even since 2018, those assessed values, the market, real estate market, is driving assessed values up in the community. We're required to stay at 100% assessed valuation, and it continues to drive that up. So that is something that then we're watching, especially at budget time, because that has a direct correlation to the taxes that you pay based on the tax rate. While the assessed value itself doesn't dictate what you pay, the tax rate does. There is a connection between the two, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. So you can see in the town of Canandaigua, the taxable values have been up. The assessed value, the total taxable value in the town of Canandaigua is $1.4 billion. That is obviously a very, very large number. For comparison, our neighboring municipality that shares the name with us, the city of Canandaigua, has an assessed value at $800,000. So a huge difference. We are a very diverse town with 25 different zoning districts. Yes, there's obviously the residential lake district and the lake houses, but we also have industrial zoning and manufacturing. We have mixed use, we have residential. We're quite a diverse community with a lot of different zoning districts that makes the town of Canandaigua a very fascinating community, specifically with those 25 different zoning districts. Stable housing market, stable assessed value has allowed the town of Canandaigua to plan in a very consistent manner for quite a while now. As we just said here, the tax rate is proposed to stay at $1.03 with the tentative budget. This little graph here, I'm just going to slide down just a little bit here so you can see this a little bit more clearly. This chart here shows you the tax rates for the town of Canandaigua, Ontario County, and the Canandaigua School District over the last 4 years. And you can see that relatively all three have remained fairly stable, with the blue on the bottom, the town of Canandaigua tax rate being $1.03 per thousand. You have the county tax rate at $6.30 going to $6.31 this past year. And then the school tax rate, which was at $19.13 in 2018, up to $20.01 per $1,000 of assessed value. We're going to talk more about that in just a second, where we'll get into some of the, actually, here it is right here. The average house that we talked about being assessed at $309,349, absolutely, I referenced this earlier, does pay a lot in property taxes. It pays $8,461 a year in property taxes. That's a lot of money. There is no doubt about that. However, of that $8,461 that you're paying in property taxes, only $319 of that actually goes for the operations of the town of Canandaigua. That's that $1.03. So 4% of your property tax bill actually stays with the town of Canandaigua. The rest either going to the county, Ontario County, or the school district. So what do you get for that $319 that you pay to the town of Canandaigua? That portion, that $1.03 per thousand. So that covers everything like, for instance, the roads, maintenance of the roads, snow plowing, salting of the roads during the winter time, shoulder improvements to the roads. You see a lot of times mowers out on the sides of the road, clearing the heavy brush, the tractor. You see it, I know you see it around the town of Canandaigua. That would be included in all of that type of stuff. Our park system for the town of Canandaigua would also be included in that $319 annually that you pay. All 8 of our parks, Ononda Park, Butler Road Schoolhouse. Obviously, we operate beaches at both of those parks with public access to Canandaigua Lake. Both of those parks have that. We've got all of our other parks, for instance, Richard Outhouse Park, which has a pirate ship park, which is very, very popular with the younger children. We've got Blue Heron Park, Schoolhouse Park. We've got McJanet Park, Old Brookside Park. and others. But that all goes into $319. There's also another big thing that many of us use as a town resident. I know that I use it also, is our transfer station. You're able to get a permit from the town clerk and come in and use our transfer station, which is currently at this point open Wednesday nights, starting at 4 p.m., Saturdays and Sundays. And you can dispose of your household waste, your recyclables, even your food scraps and that sort of thing. And that is all included in that $319. So I was talking with someone just recently about that. And they were saying to me that they would actually pay more than $319 a year if they hired someone to come and pick up their trash. So if you want to look at it like that, that's fine. That means you get the parks and the roads for nothing, essentially. If you want to look at that, it's however you want to look at that. But there's also the full services of the Town of Canandaigua Town Hall that are included in that $319. That would include your town clerk's office, the assessor's office, the development office, the office of home and community renewal associated with that. You've got the town manager's office with all the financial management, doing stuff like this, the sharing of communications, our monthly newsletter. That would all be included in that portion. For Town of Canandaigua taxpayers, property taxes paid by our residents make up approximately 16% of the town's general fund revenue. So when we look at where the revenue comes for the Town of Canandaigua to continue its operations, 16% of our revenue comes from property taxes for the general fund and the highway fund. And there's an assortment of other revenue sources that come into the Town of Canandaigua. A big chunk of that is sales tax, but assortment of other sources of revenue that come in to make up the total revenue of operations for the Town of Canandaigua. So that is the message to taxpayers. You feel free to read that. That's on pages 5 through 8 of the tentative budget. And that really gives you a lot more detail in terms of, how much it is and where it goes and those sorts of things. But again, it's 4% of the average home in the Town of Canandaigua's tax bill goes to the Town of Canandaigua for the full operations of the Town of Canandaigua. So how does that compare? How does that compare with other municipalities? And kind of how much do we end up paying? This is what we call a budget overview, a budget at a glance. And I want to give credit to a good friend of ours in the community here that many of us know through many civic organizations. Canandaigua Rotary is, I think, how I originally met George Heron, who's a Town of Canandaigua resident. But he had suggested that include a slide in the budget. This goes back 4 or 5 years ago now, that gives you a budget overview at a glance. And that's exactly what this is designed to do, to take a look at what's going on and kind of have some comparisons, quick, easy to look at where everything is at. So on this expenditure side, on this left-hand side of this chart, you have the total expenditures. So you have the highway fund, you have the general fund, highway fund at 4.2 million, general fund at 4.7 million, the fire district, which is 1.1 million, proposed. Again, this is all proposed for the 22 tentative budget. Water districts, 2.1 million. That's all of our water districts combined. That includes Canandaigua Consolidated Water District at 1.8 thousand, which are 1.8 million rather, which is our parent water district. All of our lighting districts, our drainage districts, our sewer districts. And then new this year, we've added another category called capital projects, just to help track our capital projects so that you can see what's going on with those in any given time, any given year, 3.4 million. So all in total combined, excuse me, all of those different expenditures total up to $15.8 million for the Town of Canandaigua. The across the top here, this is kind of the revenue side of things, where different sources are. About 5% comes from state aid, 2% comes from mortgage tax, 33% comes from sales tax, and property tax at 29%. So I know you're going to say, Doug, you just said 4%, excuse me, or 16% rather. And absolutely, the 16% on the property taxes was for the general and highway fund. We operate, remember I referenced the 28 special districts that we operate. We have 28 special districts who are getting services for a benefit for services that they're receiving for that specific district, whether it's water district, lighting district, sewer district. We operate those so that all the residents of the town of Canandaigua don't end up paying for a benefit that they're not receiving. I'll give you an example of that. So I live on the north end of the town of Canandaigua. There may be a water district that's operating on the south end of town of Canandaigua. I would not be getting the benefit of that water service that's being provided for the resident on the south end of town of Canandaigua. So they're in what's called a special district. Versus on the north end of town of Canandaigua, we operate a water district, for instance, the one that I'm in, that is not, all the residents don't pay the taxes in that. So the special districts are designed so that you are only paying for the services that you're receiving on the special district side, with the general and highway fund townwide making up the services that I referenced earlier for the 16%. Those special districts, when you factor in the tax levy on all those special districts, that brings that up to that 29% relative to those special districts. On the right-hand side of this chart, this gives you a kind of a comparison on what's been going on with property tax rates. This is the rate per thousand. You can see the 2020 and 2021 tax rates here. The Canandaigua School District, we'll just go with the 21 rates here at $20.01 per thousand. You've got the City of Geneva, City of Canandaigua at $7.86 per thousand. Ontario County, there's the 631 I showed you earlier. You can see the town of Geneva, Naples, Bristol, East Bloomfield, West Bloomfield, Phelps, Victor at $1.74, Manchester, on down the line till you get all the way down here to the bottom. The town of Canandaigua, and this is a good thing being at the bottom of this list. The town tax rate being $1.03 per $1,000 of assessed value. So you can see it was the same in 2020, 2021, and is again proposed the same for 2022. Down below here, I talked about this earlier. The average assessed value of a home in the town of Canandaigua is up $309,349. And this is just a quick show of, okay, based on that $309,349, but even with the tax rates staying the same, you can see that in 2021, the property owner on that assessed value home of $309,349 paid $301.75 for 22 because of the increase, not because of the tax rate, but because of the average assessed value. If all things are equal, that home going from $297,000 to $309,000, that resident would pay $317.99. So again, they would pay $16.24 more per year in your general highway tax levy, tax rate, than they would have paid in 2021, not because the tax rate changed at all, but because the market value the real estate market has driven the assessed values up. So if your home was reassessed or had an increase in the assessment, there would be an increase there. So one of the reasons we do this is to just try to track and help make sure we understand the impact of our decisions that are having on tax rates, and that becomes very important in these special districts, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. I know this really gets into a lot of detail. The budget process we'll touch on here briefly. I already touched on this a little bit. For us, the budget process for the employees of the town of Canandaigua, the staff and our department heads, really begins in the June-July timeframe. That's when we open up our financial management system for the next calendar year, fiscal year. We start to put in what we call department head request. That's where the department head is meeting with their department. They're talking about the things that they need for the upcoming year. And again, that's happening in the July timeframe to make this timeline all work, getting to that November 20th date that I mentioned earlier. So they start working on their request and putting their request in that July time. In particular, we hold a series of budget meetings with the department heads. I do as the budget officer, meet with department heads and my finance team, and we put those budget requests in as what we call a department head request. And that is recorded in our system so that, and I'll show you an example of that here in just a moment, but we do that intentionally so that when the town board then gets to the point of reviewing their steps in the process of the budget consideration, that they can see the request that the department head put in. We can see whatever changes the budget officer made to put together a balanced tentative budget and then present that to the board. And you see the variation in that so that they can go and do that. Submission of the town budget to the town board. I like to always try to have that submitted by Labor Day, which we did have the town board receive their budget just before Labor Day, their printed versions of the budget. And that really gives them all of the month of September and most of October to do that. They have the extra time in November if they wanted to schedule a special meeting, or if the calendar lines up as it does in this particular year, for them to wait and do it at the November meeting if they so choose to do that, if they need that time. Our third Monday of the month for the month of November 2021 is November 15th. That's obviously before the November 20th deadline that the state gives us. So we have a little bit of time there. So this kind of just walks you through that process. Again, possible town board public hearing on the budget on October 18th. The reason why this says possible is the town board has not yet established that public hearing. So theoretically, the town board at their September 20th meeting would actually declare the tentative budget as a preliminary budget, again, making any changes that they wish to that either now or after the preliminary budget, and then really after the preliminary budget, and then moving that forward by setting a public hearing for the October 18th town board meeting to consider that. So that's kind of the budget process there. The next pages here, this is really where it gets into some more of the detail relative to the budget and the upcoming 2022 tentative budget and the spending plan. On page 11, this is the message from myself as the budget officer to the town supervisor and to the town board. And you see that the budget that I've proposed for 2022 does keep that tax rate at $1.03 per thousand. That results in a tax cap compliant budget. I get asked quite a few questions about the tax cap compliant piece, which I'll touch on here in just a second with you, but that really relates to all 28 of those special districts as well as the general and highway fund. So that overall tax levy is how that tax rate is determined. Obviously, we all know that in 2020, we faced a unprecedented situation with the global COVID-19 pandemic, and we made significant budget adjustments in 2020, reducing expenditures and actually delaying quite a few highway projects with an unknown situation with revenues coming in and what the impact was going to be for that for 2020 and 2021. What this budget does is starts to restore our investment in our infrastructure, particular highway projects for 2022. And that's what you're seeing right here on this screen. This, this first wording here, this DEA 100.5110.400, that's actually a specific account line in the 22 tentative budget. That is, those account numbers are actually required by the New York State Comptroller's Office. It's what's called a chart of accounts. And this particular account line is for Highway Fund General Repairs Contractual. And you can see the history here of that particular budget line. It was 1.2 million in 2018, almost 1.5 in 2019. In 2020, it was actually scheduled to be even higher than that, but we made that adjustment that I was just referencing, reducing it all the way back down to 800,000. Again, about 800,000 in 2021, with the unknowns relative to where the revenue was going to fall out as a result of the COVID situation. And then that takes this proposed tentative budget really starts to invest money again in our highways where we need to make improvements. And the highway superintendent each year puts together what's called a 284 agreement, where he actually details to the town board the roads that need to be repaired, reconstructed, improvements that need to be made, repaved, all of those types of things. And all of those would fall under this particular account line, this highway fund, general repairs, contractual. Interestingly enough, I know we all need striping on the road. That's actually doesn't fall under the highway fund at all. That falls under general fund. We'll touch on that a little bit later. The funds, the districts, just to kind of give you a trend line, kind of a snapshot on where things are going. 2019 to 2022, you can see the general fund, I'm sorry here, the bottom line here is actually the lighting districts. You can see that's all stayed relatively flat. Our fire district here, our water districts, the darker blue line here, this is the total tax levy of everything. The highway fund, you can see the correction that was made relative to the COVID situation 2020, 2021, and then the general fund here. I want to touch on the tax rate. A lot of attention gets paid to the tax rate. That's that $1.03 per thousand that I was referencing earlier, and that really determines the amount of taxes that you end up paying specifically for the general operations of the town. This chart here really shows you what's been going on the last 12 years with the town of Canandaigua tax rate. In 2010, there was a decided, for political reasons, it seems, a intent to keep the town tax rate at 0. And there was a correction that had to be made at in 2021, increasing that tax rate to $1.11 per thousand. And again, for 2012 at $1.14 per thousand. What they did was, with that tax rate being at 0, they were using what's called fund balance, reserve funds. They were the savings essentially that the town had. They were depleting that in an effort to keep that tax rate artificially low. The trouble with that is you end up, if you go back and forth like that, you end up on a roller coaster ride where your taxes are constantly up and down. And I don't know about you, but I know for me, whether it's my escrow account for my mortgage, where I'm including paying a certain amount of property taxes at the end of the year or the beginning of the next year, I like a nice consistent. I'd rather be on a railroad track than a roller coaster, because if you're very flat and consistent and stable, you kind of know how to plan and what to expect and what's kind of going to happen, versus that constant up and down. And the last thing you want to do, especially as you make your monthly payment on your mortgage that may include the escrow for the property taxes, the last thing you want to have happen is get to the end of the year and get a phone call from the bank saying, hey, the tax rate was a lot higher and we need to make an adjustment and you're going to owe more. That's never a good thing. So keeping a nice, steady, stable tax rate actually helps all of us for planning purposes as the town, you for planning purposes for your own fiscal matters and your monthly obligations, as well as all of us. Since that time in 2011, you can see the town tax rate has been relatively stable. There was a little bit of a dip in 2013, 14. You can see here where the tax rate came down to just under $1. It was brought down just below $1, and it stayed relatively stable, consistent through a number of years there, 2017. And you see, really, it was stable 2017, 2018, right up until 2018. I'll just hold my cursor right there on that point. And then there was an increase. And that 2017, I can tell you specifically what that was. That was the year that I became the town manager and budget officer for the town of Canandaigua. That tax rate went from 91 cents to $1.03. That was a 12 cents increase. And that was very specific to cover the debt service for the construction of the new highway facility. So that was that 12-cent increase from 91 cents to $1.03, and you can see it stayed stable ever since that point in time. That increased to $1.03 per thousand, and it has been that way ever since. A nice stable tax rate, avoiding the roller coaster. The next page here, page 13, this kind of talks about the general budget numbers to kind of give you a comparison, the general fund, highway fund, the water districts, and kind of the total numbers, as well as the capital projects there at the bottom, and the overall numbers for each of the years 2019 through 2022. The next page kind of gets into some of the department expenditures, and you can kind of see what's going on there. There's some ups and downs with staffing adjustments and different investments associated with the specific departments. The next pages really start to get into some of the particulars of the actual proposed tentative budget. This first page here on page 14 talks about our general fund. General fund, the A fund is what it's referred to as the main fund. That's the general fund. That's where things like parks, the transfer station, town hall operations, highway striping, ironically, lighting district, for instance, or I'm sorry, not lighting district, but the lights on State Route 332, all would come under the general fund operations. And you can see here that the 22 budget does propose a increase in expenditures of about $248,000, with those mostly making up contractual and personnel expenditure increases. And those are detailed here under personnel expenses is almost $200,000. The proposal includes adding an additional transfer station employee, a full-time person to help out with all of our residents when they come to the transfer station. Includes adding a shared person between a couple of different departments, some IT, some another shared person with highway, water, assessor, and that relates to a townwide reval that's coming up for this next year, and increased hours for minutes as we continue to work on things like hybrid meetings and sharing some of that information. So some of the detail associated with that, I won't dig into that a lot. On the contractual side, that's also shown here in terms of some additional expenses proposed for 2022, and kind of some of the details there. We've also got contractual expenditures relative to engineering and highway. Kind of on the next line, this again is a general fund expense as we talk about different things, whether it's going after a grant for an improvement of a road. For instance, like we've talked many times about North Road needing a pathway from State Route 332 to the Academy, and the engineering associated with what we're now calling a curb mountable sidewalk along North Road, and the engineering associated with that. We'll be taking a look at potentially taking a look at some sewer improvements, some engineering work that'll need to be done, as well as some grant administration that'll need to be done relative to County Road 28, as well as Cheshire. The road striping that I referenced. And also, I just want to point out here, this also includes taking a look at some, this is mainly for engineering and grant services relative to crosswalk enhancements in Uptown, and taking a look at the continuation of the pathway along Middle Cheshire Road. Parks and Recreation is a general fund expenditure. Parks and Recreation for 2022, this actually budget does propose a reduction in the overall expenditures for Parks and Recreation. Again, the revenue, we try to keep that very, very stable, especially that tax rate. And then we have to look at all other sources of revenue. Parks and Recreation for 2021 was slated to spend approximately $1.3 million, with a number of those dollars coming from the Parks and Rec Fund associated with new improvements for our Parks and Rec programs. This budget actually reduces that a little bit to $662,000, but also really points out some improvements that we need to be looking at, that where there's grant money that is available, and really exploring that. Economic development, we have a Canandaigua Local Development Corporation, and this actually shows the funding for, we have a 3-year intermunicipal agreement with the city of Canandaigua, where each municipality puts in $25,000 with the LDC, and this really shows that is a reduction down from $50,000 for the Canandaigua LDC. And then some money for conservation efforts as we continue to look at conservation programs in the town of Canandaigua. That includes our Farmland Protection Implementation Grant Program, as well as other conservation programs as we continue to explore. That just touches the tip of the iceberg there on so many different things that are included in the general fund when you really start to dig into the details. This next worksheet here really kind of shows the general fund expenditures and revenue. as well as the historical graphs down below here. This is on page 18 of the budget, so that you can really look at this detail and you can kind of see what's going on. So we all take a lot of time, a lot of effort to chart this and pay attention to this so that we see what's going on and really have a clear picture. One of the things that we did in 2017 is we created what we call a capital improvement plan. And really that refers to these capital expenditures. You see this in both the highway fund and the general fund, as we look to purchase pieces of capital equipment. Particularly, that would include big trucks, snow plows, that would include vehicles, that would include technology items. We plan that through a capital plan, again, in an effort to keep a very consistent number so that we don't have the roller coaster or the ups and downs associated with, purchasing 4 or 5 snowplows in one year and nothing in the next year. So we really plan that out, and we established what's called a vehicle replacement policy. So it helps provide us guidance in terms of how we go about that. So that's on the general fund side. On the highway fund side, this is a separate fund. I talked about the 30 different funds that make up the town of Canandaigua's 2022 tentative budget. We just talked about one of them, the general fund. The second is the highway fund. It's a separate fund. It's still, the revenue associated with property taxes is still part of that $1.03 per thousand. And you can see that the other sources of revenue for the highway fund and where it comes from, $865,000 comes from property tax, 2.1 million comes from sales tax, and then all other sources. You see on the expenditure side, the blue color here, that's the personnel expenditures on the highway side, your equipment. The contractual, or the green color, that's that line that we talked about earlier, plus a few other the contractual lines, but that's all of the roadway actual improvements. And then the benefit line there at 492,000 for benefits proposed for 2022. Again, the historical expenditure data down below here, this is on page 19, associated with the highway fund, and you can kind of really see what's going on there: personnel, equipment, contractual expenditures, and the benefits there. Capital projects, I mentioned this earlier. This really kind of details some of the capital projects that we have going on and where those are at. The Sucker Brook Water Quality Improvement Projects, the WQIP. That is, for instance, many people will see the one that has been completed on State Route 5 and 20, not very far from the town hall, as well as the one that was completed on County Road 30. And that was a joint project between the town of Canandaigua and the city of Canandaigua. And that's really designed to, when we have those extreme weather events, it seems like they always come at the end of July, and we get those heavy, heavy rains. It's designed to hold back some of that water in those water quality improvement projects, keeping the sediment out of Canandaigua Lake. Sucker Brook runs north through the town of Canandaigua. It gets up to a point very close to the airport, very close to Outhouse Park, turns and goes south and heads back through the city of Canandaigua and into Canandaigua Lake. And those Sucker Brook water quality improvement projects were designed intentionally to hold that water back and hold that sediment back during those heavy peak flow events, as well as moving that forward. So we've completed 2 of those projects. There's, I think, 6 more to go associated with that. And you see there that capital project and the cash balance currently for that project. Many are familiar with our Canandaigua Consolidated Water District Booster Station and the tank improvements associated with that. That is in all a $7.5 million water project. You see the 2 new tanks have been constructed now in Cheshire up on Rock Oak Hill, and you can see those from Cheshire. We've got a couple others I'll just touch on here real quick. Pendleton, this is a farmland protection implementation grant program that we have, where we've received a grant from the state of New York to protect some farmland, an invasive species grant, cybersecurity, historical survey, local government management, records management, retention, improvements, the scanning and digitizing of paper documents. We have, I just touched on that for a quick second, we have about 15 million paper documents that have to be digitized over the next couple of years. And then our ARPA funds is our most recent capital improvement project that we just created here. And more information will be coming out soon on that. So this next page, actually from our financial software management system, details the capital projects and the expense lines. One thing is the town of Canandaigua I feel more so than many municipalities, we try to be transparent, unbelievably transparent. You can actually see the actual account lines and see what the balances are for every account line, not only in the capital projects that I just showed you, but also every single account line that we have for all 30 of those districts, all 30 of those funds, the general fund, the highway fund, all of them. All that information is right there and available for your viewing. We also provide monthly updates through the town board agenda process. When the town board agenda is published each month, there's a section on reports. And when you go into the reports and you look at the reports, you can actually see the details and where it's at on any given month. So that is published every single month as part of the town board agenda process when that comes out. The 22 budget is tax cap compliant. I referenced this earlier. The formula, there is a formula that goes through, and I'll just kind of show you that here on this next page. It includes the tax levy, it includes things like pilots, it includes carryover. There's a formula that's been established by the Office of New York State Comptroller, and you have to go through that process and put in that information. That's something that I do as the budget officer, put in all those, remove the exclusions, put the information in to calculate what our tax cap levy limit is. And for 2022, the 2022 fiscal year, our tax levy is $3.6 million. And the 2022 budget, tentative budget, proposes a tax levy of $3.59 million, putting us $30,000 under the tax cap or the tax levy limit, meaning this is a tax cap compliant budget. So I'm just going to show you something here, and I know this is really kind of getting into the details here, but the tax cap, what we have to do is actually plug in all of the information from every one of those 30 special districts and put in the amount that we would be levying, the property tax for all of those special districts, calculate up that total number, and that's where that $3.5 million comes from. So when we create a new water district or a new lighting district or a new drainage district, even though all of the residents of the town of Canandaigua may not be paying into that special district, that levy goes against our overall tax cap. So even though the residents of that district may have requested that a new water district or a new drainage district or a new lighting district be created, that actually goes against our tax cap, our overall tax levy limit. So we do run into that situation from time to time where we are not able to be tax cap compliant. This year is the second year that I proposed a tax cap compliant budget. This year it is tax cap compliant, even though we are absorbing that $7.5 million water project into our overall expenditures in the debt service associated with that. Yet we're still able to make this budget tax cap compliant. And again, as we're all recovering from the COVID situation, and hopefully with it continues to recover and progress goes in the right direction, as we continue to really understand and pay attention to the economics and what's happening, the sources of revenue, it's something that we're taking very seriously as we look at every single one of those 30 budgets associated with our overall budget. Fund balance, that's kind of like the town's savings account and kind of where things are at with that. We operate a couple of different fund balances for all 30 of those funds, all 30 of those 28 of the special districts in the general and highway fund. This chart just kind of shows you the three biggest ones being the general fund, the highway fund, and then the Canandaigua Consolidated Water District in particular, or water districts combined. And that's the numbers that are reflected here. You can kind of see what's going on with fund balance, and you see that there is fund balance or savings. Basically, the savings account would be the way I would describe it, as well as the use of fund balance that's not spent from the year before to help keep that tax rate very stable so that we don't have the roller coaster up and down. There's an addendum here. You can read for yourself here on the details on page 29 relative to parks. It's always fun to showcase some of the users of our parks and what's included in the upcoming year in terms of parks improvements, as well as there's a special section here on Motion Junction, our new inclusive playground. You can see here, I touched on this earlier. I just want to share with you department head request versus the budget officer's recommendation. Remember I said back at the beginning of this, back in the June, July time period, we start to put in all of the requests associated. The department heads put in each of the requests for their particular department as they look ahead for the upcoming year. And then what I have to do as the budget officer and the town manager is I have to go through that and prepare what's called a balanced budget and submit that to the town board. So you can see here for the general fund, the department head request totaled just over $6 million, and I had to trim that back to 4.7 million. The highway fund 5.1 million down to 4.2, and the water districts from 2.2 to 1.8. So that enables us to provide that balanced budget with that stable tax rate at $1.03 per thousand. Now, none of that information is lost. It's all still in there, and you can actually see in the report section where you see this thing called the department head request, as well as the tentative budget. And then the town board really gets to see the differences in those numbers, where those exist, and some of the details. So a lot of information there, that a whole lot more information. 167 pages make up the 30 budgets of the town of Canandaigua. I hope that kind of gives you a little bit better understanding of how the budget gets to the different stages and the processes and the creation of the 2022 Town of Canandaigua tentative budget, and kind of where it goes from here. As always, please feel free to email me, email me, call with any questions at all. Happy to answer any questions. We make this process very, very transparent and sharing that information with all of you. As always, until next month, the second Wednesday of the month, we'll be in the budget process. I hope that we can talk a little bit about form-based codes and economic development, and what that means for Uptown Canandaigua. So stay safe, be safe out there, and thank you all again for joining us on the Town Manager Citizens Academy.